The moment. The Atlantic whispered a secret. The North Atlantic was never truly silent. In 1941, its winds roared like a restless giant. Its waters churned in endless procession. And beneath the surface, predators moved unseen, hunting convoys that carried Britain's last lifeline to survival. But on a cold May morning, far from any shore, something extraordinary happened. Something that would alter the balance of the Battle of the Atlantic. A single U-boat, forced to surface in the chaos of depth charges and strafing fire, carried within it a secret Germany believed unbreakable, a secret the Allies had been chasing for years. And when British sailors climbed over its shattered hull, soaked in seawater and adrenaline, they found it. This is the story of how the British codebreakers cracked U-110 before Berlin noticed. The ocean as battleground. The early months of 1941 were the darkest of the war for Britain. France had fallen the previous year. The Luftwaffe had failed to bomb the island nation into submission. But now Hitler turned to a quieter, more relentless weapon: starvation. German U-boats, sleek, steel-gray hunters, roamed the shipping lanes between North America and Europe, sinking merchant ships with ruthless efficiency. Convoys were ambushed at night, hulls torn open by torpedoes that arrived without warning. Sailors described the sight of flaming tankers lighting the waves like floating funeral pyres. The Kriegsmarine believed it held the upper hand. Much of this confidence rested on a machine, compact, ingenious, and deadly in its implications: the Enigma cipher. Its changing keys, rotor complexity, and daily code schedules meant that, in theory, no enemy could consistently read German naval communications. If convoys couldn't see the wolf packs gathering, they couldn't survive. Inside Britain, however, an old country estate in Buckinghamshire, Bletchley Park, was beginning to hum with activity. Mathematicians, linguists, classicists, chess champions, crossword prodigies, and eccentric scholars filled its drafty rooms and wooden huts. Among them, Alan Turing, Gordon Welchman, Hugh Alexander, Joan Clark, and hundreds of others worked in quiet, relentless urgency. Yet in early 1941, they were largely blind. Naval Enigma, codenamed Shark, remained unbroken. Even with captured code books, even with brilliant minds, the Kriegsmarine's use of extra rotors and strict radio discipline made their system far harder to crack than the Luftwaffe's version. Turing himself had warned that meaningful decryption of naval traffic required not just mathematics, but material, actual machines, settings, or cipher keys. These seemed almost impossible to capture intact. Almost. Kapitänleutnant Fritz Julius Lemp. The drama of U-110 begins with a man whose name had already been written into naval history. Fritz Julius Lemp, a tall, confident officer with sharp features and a reputation for daring, had commanded U-boats since the earliest days of the war. At just 26, he had sunk the first Allied ship of the conflict, the SS Athenia, on 3 September 1939, an incident that sparked international outrage and that the German High Command initially tried to conceal. Despite the controversy, Lemp remained valued. He was brave, effective, and charismatic, traits admired within the U-boat arm. By 1941, he commanded U-110, a Type 1 mine by long-range submarine with the endurance to hunt deep into the Atlantic. According to declassified German records, Lemp and his crew left Lorient in April on what was expected to be a profitable patrol. They sailed with confidence. Their Enigma messages, weather reports, and rendezvous signals, encrypted daily, moved across the ether with complete faith in their security. Berlin believed no foreign mathematician, no enemy navy, not even the Royal Navy with all its global experience, could break into their system. They believed they were unassailable. What they did not know was that the Atlantic would soon conspire against them. The convoy onslaught on May 9, 1941, convoy OB-318, steaming westward toward North America, cut through rough Atlantic waves. The convoy was escorted by a small defensive screen, But escort groups of the Royal Navy were stretched dangerously thin. In the early hours, watching through his periscope, Lemp identified a target-rich environment: merchant ships, tankers, freighters, moving in long, vulnerable columns. U-110 and its accompanying submarine, U-2WWII, under Captain Lieutenant Adelbert Schnee, prepared an ambush. Schnee struck first. Lemp's torpedoes soon followed. 2 ships were hit. Panic rippled through the convoy as sailors scrambled to lifeboats amid explosions and choking smoke. Morse lamps flickered in the darkness, signaling confused orders. The escorts responded, racing toward the source of the attack. But this time, the convoy escort commander was Commander Joe Baker Creswell, a calm, seasoned officer with a reputation for aggressiveness. He ordered his destroyers, HMS Bulldog and HMS Broadway, and the corvette HMS Obriezia, to press the counterattack. According to British after-action reports, Obriezia made the first firm sonar contact at around noon on May 9th. The hunt was on. Depth charges and panic. Inside U-110, the atmosphere transformed instantly. The rhythmic hum of the electric engines gave way to alarms, shouted orders, and the muffled thunder of detonating charges overhead. The submarine plunged deeper. The hull creaked under pressure. The Allied ships above formed a deadly pattern, dropping salvo after salvo of depth charges, the ocean shaking as explosions tore through the water. Lemp ordered evasive maneuvers, throwing the submarine into sharp course changes. The men inside held onto pipes and bunks as the boat lurched violently. Meanwhile, HMS Bulldog's captain, Commander Joe Baker Creswell, sensed something unusual. The U-boat wasn't responding like a veteran boat. It felt as though the crew were disoriented or desperate. He ordered another concentrated depth charge run. The charges exploded dangerously close. Water began pouring into U-110. Lemp realized he had no choice. He ordered the submarine to surface. What happened next was rare in Atlantic combat. U-110 didn't surface firing. It didn't even try to escape. It burst out of the water in a cloud of spray, listing badly damaged, its conning tower scarred. HMS Bulldog charged toward it. Lemp panicked. He shouted for his crew to abandon ship. The crucial moment now came, the defining moment, one debated by historians, but consistently supported by Royal Navy accounts. Lemp, realizing the boat might fall into enemy hands, attempted to return below decks. Several survivors later stated his intention was to scuttle the submarine, opening the seacocks to sink it, but something stopped him. Some accounts suggest he saw British sailors already preparing to board. Others say he realized the flooding systems were not functioning fully. Whatever the reason, Lemp hesitated. He shouted for his crew to get clear. In the confusion, cold sea spray blowing across the deck, bullets from Bulldog's warning bursts hitting the water nearby, and men leaping overboard. Lemp either slipped or deliberately let himself drift away. His body was never recovered. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy seized a once-in-a-generation opportunity: boarding U-110. Commander Baker Creswell made a decision unusual and dangerously bold. He ordered a boarding party to capture the submarine intact. This was almost unheard of. U-boats were designed to sink quickly if compromised. Their captains were trained never to leave Enigma materials accessible. But HMS Bulldog's boarding party raced onto U-110 as it rocked violently in the waves. The scene inside must have felt surreal. The diesel engines were silent. Lights flickered dimly. Papers drifted across the floor. And in the radio room, still dry, still functional, were the treasures Bletchley Park had been waiting for. The Enigma machine itself. Code books with daily settings. Short signal books, weather reporting keys, and, crucially, the current naval cipher tables. Everything was there. Dry, intact, abandoned. One sailor later recalled, "It was like stepping into a vault the enemy forgot to lock." HMS Bulldog signaled to the escort commander, "Have boarded submarine. It appears intact." But Baker Creswell knew the importance of secrecy. He urgently radioed another message, one that would shape intelligence strategy for the rest of the war. No signals must mention capture. If Berlin learned that U-110 had not sunk immediately, they would assume the code books and machine were compromised, and the naval Enigma settings would be changed. But Berlin heard nothing. U-110 vanished beneath the waves later that day, having finally been abandoned to its fate. The capture of its secrets went entirely unnoticed. Meanwhile, an intelligence package of immeasurable value was already racing toward the British coast. The journey to Bletchley Park. When the materials from U-110 reached Britain, they were delivered under the highest secrecy to Hut 8 at Bletchley Park, the section dedicated to naval enigma, led by Alan Turing. Imagine the moment. In a cramped, overheated hut filled with cigarette smoke, stacks of message slips, the whirring of early bomb machines, and exhausted personnel, a small team opened crates containing the enemy's most sensitive secrets. What they found was better than anything they had hoped for. According to historian Ralph Erskine, the material captured from U-110 represented a complete cryptographic snapshot of U-boat operations. The daily Enigma keys for the Atlantic U-boat fleet. Weather report, ciphers, the short signal code book used to transmit sightings. The home waters cipher recognition signals, administrative instructions, and most importantly, an actual M3 Enigma machine, complete with rotors set to the current day's key. For the first time in the war, naval enigma wasn't an impossible puzzle. It had become solvable. The analysts worked with an intensity bordering on obsession. With the captured cipher tables, they could suddenly read weeks' worth of backlogged intercepts. They could reconstruct key patterns, confirm rotor positions, and understand the subtleties of U-boat procedure. As one cryptanalyst wrote in her diary, it was like the enemy opened a window and we could see in. But Turing and his colleagues also knew something else, something far more urgent. The Germans must never find out. Berlin's blind spot. The Kriegsmarine was confident in its secrecy procedures. The orders around codebooks were strict. Captains were instructed to destroy sensitive materials if capture seemed imminent. Naturally, the German command assumed that if a U-boat failed to return, it had sunk without giving up its secrets. This assumption saved the Allies. Berlin received U-110's last transmission shortly before its attack run on convoy OB-318. When no further signals came, and when days passed without news, the Luftwaffe simply logged U-110 as missing. The standard presumption was that it had been sunk with all hands somewhere in the Atlantic. No suspicion, no panic, no change of codes. The Germans had no idea that British sailors had walked inside the submarine. No idea that the Enigma machine was now in the hands of their enemy. No idea that their vaunted cipher system, considered mathematically unbreakable, was now compromised. According to historical records, wrote one post-war German officer, we assumed everything had gone to the bottom. It never occurred to us that the British might have captured code material. That miscalculation would prove fatal to the U-boat arm, but much work still lay ahead. Possessing the material was one victory. Turning it into intelligence that could save convoys, that was another. Inside Hut 8, the response. The arrival of the U-110 materials triggered immediate activity at Bletchley Park. Turing and his colleagues developed pathways to interpret the naval cipher with unprecedented speed. Previously, decrypting even a handful of messages had taken immense effort. Now, with the short signal book and other aids, the analysts could understand how the Germans structured their communications, how they abbreviated, how they repeated certain weather terms, how they formatted sighting reports. These details mattered. Enigma may appear purely mathematical, but in practice, breaking it required understanding human habits, common phrases, procedural shortcuts, and predictable patterns. The capture from U-110 gave the codebreakers the clearest view yet into those habits. Furthermore, having an actual machine meant the British could test bomb configurations properly. They could simulate expected rotor behavior, check wiring responses, refine logical deductions, and verify cribs, probable plaintext guesses. The effect was dramatic. Within weeks, Bletchley Park could read some naval enigma traffic within hours of interception. Suddenly, convoy routes could be altered. U-boat wolf packs could be avoided. Supply ships to Malta, Russia, and West Africa could navigate more safely. The Battle of the Atlantic, previously on a knife's edge, began to shift. But outside, the Atlantic remained deadly. The capture of U-110 didn't end the U-boat threat overnight. In fact, during the summer of 1941, Admiral Karl Dönitz intensified operations, pushing more submarines deeper into the convoy lanes. Germany was still months from adding a fourth rotor to their naval enigma machines, a change that would temporarily blind the Allies again. But the intelligence gained from U-110 allowed Allied leaders to understand the enemy's movements with a clarity never before possible. Yet secrecy still dominated every decision. Churchill was informed, but ordered absolute silence. Only a handful of people within the Admiralty understood the significance of the capture. The escort crews who boarded the submarine were sworn to confidentiality for the rest of the war. One of them later said in an interview, "We were told never to speak of it, not even to each other. It was like a ghost operation, something that happened and then vanished." The British continued to sink U-boats. They continued to reroute convoys away from danger, and Berlin never understood why their ambushes suddenly failed. Meanwhile, in the quiet, gas-lit huts of Bletchley Park, Turing's machines clicked, clattered, and hummed into the night, chasing down new keys, reading new signals, and exploiting the advantage granted by a single captured submarine. The human side of a silent victory. While the capture of U-110 is often told in terms of intelligence and operations, there is a human side often overlooked. Consider the German sailors, young men, many barely in their 20s, who found themselves in icy water, swimming for survival. Several were rescued by British sailors, who extended ropes and hauled them aboard, some half-frozen, some injured. The British rescue crews saw them as fellow sailors, not faceless enemies. According to diary entries from HMS Bulldog's medical staff, several German survivors expressed shock that they were being treated well. One young seaman whispered, "I thought you would let us drown." Such moments reveal the strange, contradictory humanity of war. Two sides locked in a deadly struggle, yet individuals still capable of compassion. On the British side, the men involved in the boarding party risked their lives climbing into a potentially booby-trapped submarine. The submarine could have sunk at any moment. Depth charges could have ruptured its hull further, and the possibility always existed that a wounded German sailor might have remained aboard, prepared to resist. But they went in anyway. They did not know the materials inside would change the war. They acted out of training, instinct, and duty. Meanwhile, at Bletchley Park, the codebreakers, many working 12-hour shifts, often never learned what operations their decryptions influenced. They rarely knew which ships they had saved, which attacks they had prevented, or which battles their insights had shaped. They lived in secrecy. Their families never knew what they truly did. Their achievements would remain classified for decades. Yet every decrypted message sent to the Admiralty carried an unseen footnote, made possible by U-110. Tension builds. A new danger emerges. But even as Britain exploited the newfound intelligence windfall, a threat loomed on the horizon, one that would soon shake Bletchley Park to its core. In August 1941, whispers emerged through intercepted German signals, suggesting that a significant change was coming to naval communications. A new Enigma rotor, a new set of procedures, something designed specifically to address weaknesses the Germans did not yet realize the British had discovered. The codebreakers feared what this meant. If the Germans upgraded their system, the window opened by U-110 could slam shut overnight. Time was running out. Every message cracked, every convoy saved, every wolf pack avoided. In those crucial months, depended on speed and secrecy. The capture of U-110 had given the Allies an advantage, but it would not last forever. And what happened next would determine whether the Atlantic would be won or lost.